Welcome everybody, it's lovely to see you all at this economics part of Nova Academia. I wanted to talk about two things. I first wanted to talk a little bit about what you think an economist is, the good ones, and then I wanted to talk about some basic economic ideas. But I first wanted to introduce what I see as the best of economics, right? I think that economists, when they started out, and I'm thinking of Adam Smith, I'm thinking of John Maynard Keynes, but I'm thinking of the well-known early economists. They saw themselves almost as architects of society. They saw themselves as trying to build parts of society. So they were thinking, well, which ministry should we have? How should we orient trade policies? Should we have more hierarchy? Should we have less hierarchy? Should we as a society invest more in education? And if so, how would we do that? And how do we set up the standards for food or around all kinds of regulation? And this is a very strange way of looking at the world. So when I travel around the world and I meet other people, they've often never met somebody like that, right? This is sort of a new kind of person to them because they're a little bit afraid of economists because the economist looks at them almost like a piece of clay, right? They're sort of, how am I going to fit you in? Or how am I going to fit in your whole company or your whole division? And in their head, they're already playing, do we need this division or is it actually bad? Should we just get rid of this division, right? And so it's a kind of boyish, Lego kind of way of thinking. And for many people, that's sort of very frightening. But for me, that's the beauty of economics in the sense that you're trying to think of how an organization, society, a people, even a culture could be. And then, of course, there's the question, well, what would be good for them rather than what would be bad for them? And there is that sort of creative aspect to it. Well, you know, what is possible here? Yes, there's a reality here, but are the good choices being made? Are we investing in the right things? Are we choosing the right things? Are we spending our health money on the right things? Or have we set it up completely wrong? Right? And of course, you have different people who have different problems with that. But when people then give me their main critique, which is kind of, well, you economists, you're playing God with society, right? Shouldn't you just trust that everybody knows what they're doing? My answer to that is always, well, but how do you think reality came about? Reality is part of sort of an organic growth, an organic change, plus people indeed trying to design stuff, trying to architecture stuff. And reality never works out the way you designed it, the way you planned it, but planning has been part of it. Design has been part of it, right? There's an awful lot of things we now see in practically every country which we've learned from each other. Everywhere you see the same education structure, primary school, secondary school, some notion of tertiary, universities. The road looked the same everywhere, right? The way in which food safety is handled pretty well is almost the same everywhere. How do you think that came about? Well, people planned it, they experimented with it. This is very much what economists did, and we learned from other countries. So what do you think of this idea of economics? Is that how you thought of economics, or what was prior to me giving you the spiel about, you know, economists at best, they sort of see society as a piece of clay that they want to mold, and also large organizations. I mean, does that appeal, or do you say, oh my God, I don't want to see an economist again in my life?
Oh, I would just add to your definition that the advisors to the architects of society as a general rule.
Yes.
They're typically not doing the building themselves.
It's very true. It's very true. Economists are not the king. Economists are the advisor of the king. But, you know, the king never has time to do the architecture, right? He's busy being king, being powerful, as it were, right? But I would say more than that we're just advisors to power, although that's definitely largely a self-image. The really good economists, they see themselves almost as the advisors of everything and try to co-create this, right? So it's more that they take care of that side of business of large groups and large organizations, much as somebody else takes care of the water supply, and somebody else takes care of the electricity, and somebody else takes care of being boss, and somebody else takes care of the nurturing of children. These are just roles, as it were, right? And the economist plays the role of, okay, thinking, in the general organization of how we do stuff, what is still lacking, what should we do more of, how can we do that, can I engender that? So advisors to society. But you're right, they hardly ever have any real power, right? Although some of them, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was an economist, and Kofi Annan, they were economists, they make it to places of authority. But even then, their say is usually not the top, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're very useful, and also personally, I would wish that they would be like a forecast. Because we are so many times we are surprised of the development in economics and the outcome. But I think why is it so difficult to predict this outcome? Not only based on calculations, of course, but also on our habits and the history.
I very much agree, and that's the second part of what I'm going to talk about, is sort of how impossible it is to know what is going on, to predict what is going on. So a famous saying about economists is that they've predicted 9 out of the last 5 recessions. That's just very true. We can always tell you afterwards why the recession happened and what should have been done to avoid it, but we never know beforehand, right? So you're definitely right that economists often pretend to know a lot more than they really do, right? And they're often sort of magicians, right? We play with models and with numbers and with equations, and I've been an econometrician, I've sort of been through that route, right? And it's often because it's expected of you. You know, if you don't do the magic sauce, if you cannot show a nice graph and, do lots of solving difficult-looking formulas, well, then you can't be serious, can you, right? So there's also an aspect of role-playing to this, right? But I think that most of what the useful economists do is not only not grasped in numbers and equations, but furthermore, that's not where it starts from. Economic knowledge starts much more from narratives, from stories of how other societies function, right? So take, for instance, the examples I just said, right? Yes, there's a lot of mathematics and numbers around building a road, right? There's a lot of technique about, well, how do you make all the little stones work together, and how broad should it be, and what's the load that can carry a truck, and all that kind of thing, right? There's a lot to that. But the main reason why you say, well, we need a new road and it could be better is because, well, you've seen one in China, and you've seen them do it there, and you've seen how it functions, right? Okay, then you can transport things from factories to cities, and that has this and that effect. These are stories, these are observations, and it's sort of, well, they've worked it out, so we should be able to work it out, right? And then you think, well, how are we going to build this road? The economist is not thinking of, I've got to solve the same sort of technical problems. They're thinking, okay, do we then need the Chinese engineers to tell us how to do it, right? What do we need to bring together to be able to build these roads here, right? Who does what aspect of the planning? Who does what aspect of the teaching of the various engineers? Or the usage of this? And then that's got to be combined with stuff. So the way the economist, again, looks at this is like the clay, right? It's sort of, okay, there's a new ingredient there. And how are we going to bind that? And these are stories, right? The heart of economics is storytelling. We're the fairy tale tellers in some way, because we tell the way the world could be. And then we say, now look at the clay in front of you. It looks like sort of dark, unmolded clay. But this could be a beautiful chair, right? Or it could be a building or a cathedral, right? So we tell stories of magic to a certain degree. But many people like to see the magic source, and so if for no other reason, you've got to show that you're able to do it, because otherwise people won't take you seriously. Or you can't do an equation. Oh my God, you can't be a real economist then, right? Even despite the fact that we hardly ever predict something truly well.
But what is like the economic function of what people want and need, and what they think they want but is not good for them?
There too, the good economists will ask themselves, why do people want this, right? Where does that come from? And like Cheer, they sort of look for the deeper structures. Well, what made you want that, right? Is that just a matter of somebody having something to sell? Somebody selling a medicine that you don't actually need, and then he convinces you you're ill, which you're actually not, right? We think like that. We think of, okay, what are their incentives? What are they making out of this? Or, well, you want to eat. Well, that's very good. That's very healthy. Keep on wanting to eat. This keeps you alive, right? So there's a judgment there, right? Is this a good want to sort of, for society to push, to propagate, or is in some way there's an unwanted want, whereby the question is, can we get rid of this? Can we have different structures that make you less vulnerable to advertising and creation of wants that you shouldn't have? But there is also another thing to say, which is one of the basic economic ideas I didn't want to talk about too much at length, but is that yes, if there's one belief that economists have, and belief in the same sense that Cheer talks about truth, which is that we act upon this, right? This is the basis of the reality on which we make choices, is that people want infinite stuff. There is never enough for people, right? And you can't get this out of them. You can't make them a different human, right? There's always those people who will always want more and strive relentlessly to more and more and more and more and more, right? And in that sense, there's always an element of conflict. There's always an element of, well, are we going to spend more money on the last 2 weeks of someone's life, or are we going to spend money on somebody's childhood? Am I going to go to France on holiday or somewhere else? I'm going to buy a car, all that at the individual level, but also at the societal level. Are we going to build more hospitals or more schools? Right? Are we going to do development aid, or are we going to spend it on our own war industry directly? Right? So there's always choices, and there's this infinity of wants. And so economists find it very normal that people are always marketing the stuff that you should spend on, right? Because we see this as a tug of war, right? A game, right? And then we're not judgmental about that, right? Of course you tell us about your wonderful new things that we should all buy. Let's hear the argument. Right? Why should I spend on that or not that? Right? Convince me, as it were. Right? There's an element of consumerism, but we try to look beyond this consumerism, which is also, well, what is a better outcome for most of us? Right? So acting as a group. Are we okay? Have you ever met an economist before? Can I ask?
You?
I'm the first one. Yeah, yes. I ask this of Saudi audiences in Saudi Arabia where I teach. And in a room of 50 to 60 people who are 35 on average, there's normally only 1 or 2 who've ever met an actual true economist, right? So it tells you we're rare, right? But those who've met true economists say, yeah, that's exactly what they're like. And then they say, well, they're a little bit aristocratic in some sense, because they're almost standing outside of society to the degree that's possible, and sort of seeing us all like moldable, right? And it feels a little bit, right? But also, if you get used to that, it's sort of, well, but they don't know for sure, so they can be argued with, and to a certain extent can be interacted with. Oh, but you're wrong on that, convince me that this is right, right? And the good economists are all for that, right? If they can't explain it, because they're not the powerful ones, their job is to explain, right? Okay, so let me then tell you about basic economic ideas, and let me give you this sort of cheat sheet of basic economic ideas, and I think there are about 15 to 16 of them, and what you are looking at is the result of almost 20 years of developing an economic curriculum. So the first time I put together a sheet like that, it only had 6 or 7 economic ideas, and that was in 2004 when I was doing this for the Australian Treasury, so for their Ministry of Finance basically. And every 2 years or so I've added a new economic idea. And none of these economic ideas, in a sense, are purely mine, in the sense that I came up with them. It's more that I sort of discovered these ideas, but then also discovered the people who wrote about them, right? And so all of these are sort of recognized by people who truly know an awful lot about economics, although most economic professors probably would only know half of them, or this or that, right? But if you get a true expert in economics, they will recognize all of these in some capacity or another, and there are whole libraries on these. And so each of these ideas, to a certain extent, if it's a perspective, a story about, well, this is seemingly very important in human societies. It is a principle of how we've organized things and how you can build things. So it's almost an architectural principle that sort of explains something, but also has a kernel of malleability in it. You know, oh, this is what you do with this type of clay. This is what you do with that kind of problem. And so I sort of wanted to talk about one of them. I wanted to talk about embodied cognition. It's on the second page, so it's one of the more later ones. It's one of the interesting ideas, which is a little bit less mainstream economics, but Michael Polanyi is associated with this. The Austrian School of Economics is associated with this. And it takes some getting used to, but it has a lot of characteristics of an idea which you see in many different parts of the humanities. You also see it in biology. So in order to explain the idea of embodied cognition and what it means for economics, it's handy to start with a question. Do you know how the cells in your body divide? Do you know?
Well, I think it's meiosis, but the DNA at the center of the cell splits and basically creates 2 copies of each other, and then that grows into 2 cells.
Ah, you clearly paid attention in biology class. But do you think that's the only thing that happens? I mean, these cells are incredibly complex organisms, right? I mean, millions and trillions of molecules, there's all kinds of splitting and adding and this and that. What you described is a small part of the process. Would you know every part of the process?
Not a chance. No.
Do you think there's any human in the world or any group who understands that process and all the things around it that are needed to make it happen? You know, all the bloodstream around it, all the other cells around it, how they have to be for this to happen, so that they can recreate it. Do you think we've worked this out as scientists?
Nope.
So, because I know that there are other experts which are part of Nova Academia who are totally cell experts, right? And I hope that they won't correct me later. But I think I'm correct in saying nobody knows exactly how to do this and recreate this, right? It is fantastically difficult, right? Incredibly difficult. But your bodies do it trillions of times every day. Now, does your brain know how to do it? No. But your body knows it, right? It happens. And it happens in a fairly regular pattern, right? You know, when you cut yourself, there'll be a lot of new cell divisions taking place, and the cell divisions all over your body taking place, and all kinds of cells in your body which are not yours are dividing as well, right? There are lots of bacteria in your gut and this and that, and they're dividing as well. They play the same game, right? So a highly complex thing is happening inside your bodies trillions of times a day, and you'd have no idea how it happens. Now, similarly, would you know exactly how your kidneys work or your liver works, right? But do you know roughly what function they have, what they do in your body, what they take care of? Yeah?
Yeah, reasonable.
Well, tell me, what do they do?
The kidneys, I get it mixed up with liver, but it gets rid of toxins in the bloodstream.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I'm not an expert either, but I know they take care of all kinds of quite particular things in the body, right? There's another person in Nova Academia whom I know has actually done their PhDs on kidneys, and I'm sure I'll get a long lecture tonight about exactly what it is they do. But again, do you think anybody who's worked it out to such a degree that they can create an artificial kidney or liver which remotely works to the same degree as our body does? No. So there again, our bodies and all of our bodies do things which we don't cognitively understand. Well, this is an aspect of what we think of as embodied cognition, which is your mind doesn't know it, you can't write it down, and within your body, it is only in a particular area which knows it by doing it, right? Which knows it by doing it. And as such, you can see the human body as an incredibly complex organism. You can even see us as a cooperation of cells, right? That we are a multitude of all kinds of cells and organisms. We're also cooperating with things which don't have our DNA, right? We are a cooperative that's walking around, right? And this helps the entire organism. But we've done this, as it were, via, in all different parts. We've gone to special functionalities, if you like, right? Things that are taken care of, right? So the liver takes care of something, our kidney takes care of something, our heart takes care of, our brain takes care of something, right? Now, the big insight that Michael Polanyi had, and that others have had, is that every large human organization works along a very similar principle, which is in the sense that management doesn't know what they're doing, right? It is more that we've grown solutions around problems that take care of things. And so ask yourself, why does government in the world have lots of these different ministries? Why don't we just have one ministry which brings out the big plan and everybody then just follows that plan? Why don't we do it that way? Why do we have these separate ministries?
I guess because it's too complex to do this in one ministry.
Yeah, decentralized decision making is typically more efficient. So
yes, but it wouldn't mean that it's impossible, right? There's incentives in decentralized decision making, but there's also this aspect of knowledge, as it were, right? So let me give you a good example of a puzzle, right? So suppose Elon Musk, who is brilliant, very smart, whatever you think of him, right? I don't take a stance on it, but he has in his head that I believe he has in his head that he wants humanity to go to Mars, right? Does he know whether that's possible? technically at the moment. Can he know? No.
I think also Elon Musk really moves like a problem solver.
Yeah.
So he's like the whole day he's like fixing problems. But the question is like, what does he prevent? Like which problems will be there? So what kind of strategy do economic people or Elon Musk or is it like economists make to decide what would be the problem solving motivation?
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think his basic strategy is for building the organization, if you like, that would get humanity to Mars? How do you think he and his team would set about trying to solve a problem which they don't know they can solve? What do you think they do? Do you think they start with the super grand plan and then everybody just goes ahead and does something individually? Or how do you think they do it?
Experiment. Just try to make like a spaceship and see how far it goes.
Okay, let's think about. Let's try to talk about how to make a spaceship. Do they think, again, it's all designed from scratch in one go, or how do you think they do that?
Trying to measure things and to make some mathematical techniques.
That's a good question. I'm really wondering how would I do it or how does he do it? Of course, there's already a lot of information about maybe spaceships, but I have the idea that he is someone who is approaching is completely different and he's starting at zero somehow.
Well, my guess would be that they would make a list of the problems you encounter with getting into space or going to Mars, break it up into more manageable, smaller problems, and then look for various people who are good at solving that particular problem and let them experiment.
Well, exactly. So which is the strategy you describe is a little bit the strategy of a brain which is thinking, how do I create a body which does something I don't understand? Right? So it's the same trick again, right? And that's indeed how they do it, right? So think about the kind of problems that they then think about, right? It's sort of, okay, we need rocket fuel. That's highly particular. There's all kinds of chemical reactions. It's a very particular field, right? It's got to be fixed rocket fuel. It's got to fit into an engine. Okay, there's a team on rocket fuel. And they buy in some people who know a bit about that. But it's got to be all redone, right? He wants it from scratch. So there's got to be a factory which does it and all the ingredients. Okay. Well, then we need some rockets to carry things up into space. So we need a rocket division, right? And a rocket division subdivides. There is the sort of the pipe with all the fuel in it. That's a separate team, right? And then there's the exhaust. Well, that's very complicated. That's another team. And then there's the payload on top of it. Well, that's a whole set of teams, right? You need heat shields. Well, that's a whole area, right? And then you need a living environment. Well, that's a whole area. And you need lots of other stuff in there. All kinds of different areas. So hundreds of small groups. And each gives them $1 million, right? Okay, you try and figure it out, right? Right? But also, problems outside this sort of physical technical stuff. There's also, where can we shoot these rockets from? Who are going to be put in it? What training does an astronaut need? How do we get them? Who trains them? What do they eat, right? What should their psychological profile be? Where should we go and find them? What should we pay them, right? How do we build the road to where we're gonna shoot these things up, right? How much electricity do we need, right? These are all lots and lots of different problems. And there's no way that Elon Musk and even a team of 20 brilliant scientists have any chance of solving that. But a team of 100,000 scientists broken into 1,000 different functional groups, which all solve a very, very particular problem, right? Once on Mars, what kind of structure do you need, and how would you try to get soil going, and all that kind of stuff, right? You put them on it for years, right? And you let them experiment. You let them try stuff, right? That is the way that kind of thing is approached. That's the way how, we once had a space mission. That's the way how we almost solve any very complex problem. That's how we solved the problem of trying to make a new academia. That's how we tried to solve the problem of setting up a health system That's how we set out to try and solve the problem of making a new harbor, for instance. So almost any large complex problem you see in this world of how to run things, which are very, very difficult, right? This is how we do it. We do it just like a body, but we sort of say, well, okay, we need something that looks like a liver. We don't know how to do it, and the liver needs to have 10 other functionalities. We don't know how to do that either, but we're going to build small pieces of the liver, and that's going to be done locally. So you get all this local knowledge, as it were, in these areas. Well, but then you have another problem, which is, do these people know whether the solution they've come up with fits in with the rest? Can they know? Can they know? They can't, right? They can't, right? So what is then your next trick? How are you going to deal with all the problems of the fact that you've got hundreds of these groups, which have all come up with brilliant solutions to particular problems you set them for, you pay them for, but most of their solutions don't work with the solutions of the other ones. You know, the rocket fuel doesn't fit into the nozzle of the other one, and the road to it doesn't actually carry that kind of rocket, and the astronauts are not actually able to sort of get on well with each other, and the payload doesn't fit up on the rocket, and once the Mars rover would break down once you're there, right, the whole thing falls apart with lots of... What do you do then? How do you solve that problem? That you've created a problem which is that they don't know what the other ones are doing. That's how you've tried to solve things. What do you do then? What do you do about that problem?
Yeah, there we arrived at the current problem in the world. I think we highly overdid it to make things in China for over here, and we did not really take a good example on the body example with the same metabolic system, and you have to communicate intern, and it's not even wireless inside of the body. Maybe some processes are wireless. I don't know, but so yeah, this is difficult. I don't know. I think we have. It's getting too far apart and too. I have no solution to this, so I don't know. Even the language is already a problem. So when these different scientifics or I don't know. I have no idea how to find a solution to this.
Well, my guess would be, to use your previous analogy, is that you need a group with the same functionality as the brain has in the body. So you need a group that oversees all the different groups and sort of talks amongst themselves. The communication hub, as it were.
There are communication hubs. That's certainly one of the things we do. But several of the other basic economic ideas I put in there are grand ideas which humanity has discovered over thousands of years of how to deal with this secondary problem. Because this secondary problem, we see this as the silo problem, which, as you say, is huge now, right? I mean, it's a deep problem in our society now. We're all specialists, and we don't talk to each other, we don't understand each other, and this is getting worse and worse and worse, right? So the disconnect between what little bits of brilliant people are doing gets worse and worse and worse. But we do have answers to this from history, right? I mean, the Chinese bureaucracy, which sort of figured out the first sort of how to do this, also figured out additional mechanisms how to do this, right? So to give you that a nub, because we don't have time to go into all of that, and these are libraries of thought which will take us, many weeks and months at the castle in order to work through how this is done to such a degree that you can design this, right? But one of the key tricks that we use is yes, there is a bit of sort of central information gathering, but also what we do is we take young, smart people like yourselves who've proven themselves to be good at something, right? So they are a specialist in somewhere. We rotate you around. We put you 6 months in one part of the company or one part of the ministries and 6 months in another part, or 3 months. And we make you into a group, and you talk to each other as a group, and you talk about the problem that this little piece of the company or this little piece of the Mars exploration is created for that piece. And then you try and work that out. And then you go to a third one, you see a problem, oh, these two together create a problem for that. Now, you don't have enough time in your life as a youngster to go through all the hundreds of groups that are to do with getting something to Mars, but if I have hundreds of youngsters and I rotate them around, then as a group they do know all the problems that are created between these little subgroups. And so then you have a whole secondary system of figuring out the easy problems that they create to each other. Okay, let's adjust the fuel, or can we adjust the rocket somewhere, and would that then create that, right? So all this kind of experiments up and down the chain, horizontally and vertically, happens, right? And you have You have a target group, or you have a select group, or you have a white paper on, okay, the joint problem that we're all facing with, the heat, it's too much, or we have a problem with the place where we're going to do this, or education in general, right? And so they have task forces to deal with very particular problems, which are then created by all these silos, right? That's a trick, right? And over time, this group of rotating, specialized youngsters, they become generalists. They become your senior managers. You basically let them run the place, right? And they, as a group, they've not only experienced a lot of these problems, they also know, you need to keep this rotation going because new ones come, but they also have experience in how to then overcome these problems, how to deal with that, right? What the quick fix solutions are, what the deeper solutions are. Oh, that whole group is dysfunctional, we need to get rid of them, we need to put a different group in place. Oh, we didn't think about, but we need 5 more groups for, all kinds of technical problems that have come up, right? And so they know the tricks of the trade, if you like, right? But also you then created a group out of them, an elite, if you like, right? And you see that in practically every large society with a large bureaucracy, there's kind of an elite looking after them. And we call them the deep state. So it doesn't mean that these are people you might like, but to some extent they're inevitable. They create, because they're the ones who take care of the problems created by the silos. So you see what a tricky thing, as it were, our societal bodies are, right? We've subdivided incredibly complex problems into all kinds of small problems so that we can solve it. And then we've got these huge second problems, we don't talk to each other. But we've set it up that way, that's deliberate, right? So it's kind of you can see the difficulty of the economic architect in here, right? Okay, what sub-problems, and how do I then deal with the problem that I've just created, right? And this is the only means we found towards it. We've not found a way for the grand plan. Though, of course, there are lots of people who say they have the grand plan. But anybody who says they have the grand plan, whether they call that the strategic development goal, the sustainable development goals, or Agenda 2030, I mean, does that even sound remotely realistic then? That anybody could do that? It starts to sound ridiculous, right? It's sort of the fleas on the back of the elephant starting to jump up and down. Oh, I know which way it's going that way. No, you don't. Right? No, you don't. Are there any questions about that? Because I think we're out of time. Right. But you can see how intricate this is, right? And but these are knowable things, right? We know the tricks that we've come to as humanity. Okay. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Great.